Garrido, you are recognized for 5 minutes or a few more if you'd like. Go right ahead.
I want to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to shine a light on what's happening here in the city of Chicago. I'm here today to discuss the adverse effects of politics on law enforcement in Chicago. While law enforcement and politics should operate in distinct spheres, their intersection severely undermines the efficiency and the credibility of our police force. When politicians prioritize ideological goals over evidence-based practices, it puts our officers in a difficult position. They become pawns in a larger political game, forced to enforce laws and policies that may not necessarily serve the best interests of our community and public safety. Political agendas also heavily impact how resources are allocated in our department. The defund the police movement has had dire consequences. The result, a police department that is both underfunded and understaffed, compromising our ability to serve and protect. We often hear that the silent majority supports the police. Yet, unfortunately, our silent majority here in Chicago is asleep at the wheel. Despite having over 1.5 million registered voters here in Chicago, nearly 1 million stayed home during the last mayoral election. And those numbers happen again and again, over and over every election. The result is allowing a radical minority electing politicians with agendas that don't serve the broader community's interests. We have a mayor that actually scolds reporters for demonizing children when asking questions about the mobs of teens that regularly rampage throughout our downtown business district, destroying property and stealing anything they can get their hands on. Lack of voter interest has given us legislators that changed the threshold for felony theft from $300 to $500, and then they gave us Kim Foxx, who increased it from $500 to $1,000. So as long as you steal something that's under $1,000, you're not going to get charged with a felony in Cook County. Illinois state legislators also passed the 800-page Safety Act in the early hours of the morning with little to no discussion whatsoever. They passed this act and it gave us no cash bail that just went into effect last week. On the first day of no cash bail last week, individuals charged with violent crimes were released without any restrictions. 2 people were charged with robbery, and a guy was accused of punching a Chicago police officer in the face, and they went home without restrictions, and there was no request by the prosecutor for a detention hearing. Another offender was sent home without any restrictions after being accused of attacking 4 police officers and sending 2 to the hospital. Yet again, the prosecutor's office did not ask for any detention hearing. Chicago politicians also often make sweeping generalizations that don't reflect the complexities of law enforcement. These same politicians publicly refer to our police department as systemically racist. This not only undermines the public trust, but also affects officers' morale and effectiveness. Constant political interference has had a detrimental impact. In just the first 100 days since Mayor Johnson was sworn into office on May 15, 2023, we've had over 200 homicides, 900 people have been shot, 2,500 robberies, 5,000 stolen cars, 2,000 burglaries, and 300 carjackings. Since January of 2020, almost 15,000 people have been shot in the city of Chicago, and almost 3,000 have been murdered. The problem is, it's become so normalized here that those numbers aren't even shocking to us anymore, and they're not even shocking to the general public. Department policies, lack of manpower, and Illinois laws have impacted our ability to make arrests as well, dropping over 83% from 225,000 arrests in 2006 to the last few years we've been averaging about 38,000 arrests a year, a significant drop. Catalytic converter thieves are now armed and they're shooting at homeowners and residents that confront them. Carjackers are getting younger and younger. Most of them are under the age of 18 years old. As a matter of fact, they just arrested 4 of them a few days ago. One was as young as 12 years old. Officers are retiring and resigning at alarming rates. We're currently over 2,000 officers short on the Chicago Police Department. And of the 1,100 officers that left last year, 350 of them were resignations, which used to be unheard of here. And those resignations, the majority of them are lateral transfers. So they're not leaving law enforcement, they're leaving Chicago law enforcement. Officers are second-guessing themselves. With a job that requires you to make split-second decisions, second-guessing yourself can bring devastating mistakes. One example was an officer who was fighting with an offender on PCP. He was able to overcome her and repeatedly bang her head against the concrete while her partners and other officers tried to tase him and tried to subdue him. They subsequently got him in custody, but not before she sustained massive head injuries and permanent brain damage. The one thing that she said afterward was she thought she was going to die, and she knew that she should shoot him. But she didn't do it. She chose not to because she didn't want her family and the department to go through the scrutiny that would be made public the next day in the news. And it's not just laws that make our communities unsafe. These elected officials have discarded experience and used race and gender to select the leaders of our department. The last superintendent, David Brown, was probably the worst of all. He brought us scarecrow policing, excessive canceled days off that exhausted our officers, politically motivated punishments and penalties for minor infractions, and promotion after promotion of inexperienced officers based solely on their gender and the color of their skin. We have people now in this department that have actually gone from the rank of sergeant to deputy chief in 10 months, or they've gone from sergeant to commander in less than 2 months. And they haven't been given the opportunity to learn their roles in those positions before they move on to the next rank, which not only impacts morale in the department, but also impacts the quality of leadership. And probably the worst statistic of all is our police suicide rate. The national average for law enforcement is 30% above the national average. Here in Chicago, it's 60% above the national average. We usually average about 2 to 3 officers a year that take their lives. Last year, 7 took their lives. Chicago and Illinois politicians have come together to create a toxic work environment like we've never experienced before. These policies and legislation have made our communities less safe and made it even more dangerous to be a Chicago police officer. We can't afford to let the silent majority sit quietly anymore, and I hope with hearings like this and repeatedly speaking about it that hopefully we can get the word out that elections have consequences, and they need to start paying attention to who they're voting for and who they're putting in office, because the consequences so far have been devastating. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant.